The Ghost Boy of Highway 95. I have never shared this experience, but I thought it would be a good place to tell it, of what we thought might have been a ghost. This happened almost a decade ago. My family was moving from Reno, Nevada to Las Vegas, Nevada. We were separated into two cars, the moving truck and the family car. I rode with my mother in the family car, and my younger brother was in the truck with my father. At some point on the long, boring drive through the Nevada desert, I fell asleep at noon. I woke up from my nap and looked around in a daze. After a few minutes, I thought I saw, but I can't actually say I saw, but rather felt with a different sense, a boy on the right side of the road. I didn't find it odd for a boy to be alone on the side of a road in the middle of the desert during the day, but when I looked in my rearview mirror to see if the boy was still there, we were apparently turning a corner, and the boy was no longer in sight. I asked my mom, "Did you see that kid on the side of the road?" And she said, "No, there wasn't a kid. I've been staring at the road this whole time. Go back to sleep." So I dismissed the idea and thought no more about it. We moved up to lunchtime, maybe an hour later, and decided to meet my dad and brother at a McDonald's somewhere down the road. When my dad and brother walked in, my brother excitedly exclaimed, "Did you see the ghost?" Shocked, we all, except my dad, asked him what he meant. My dad explained that just before Hawthorne, my brother said he saw a ghost kid on the side of the road, mouth open, clothes in tatters. My brother said he had skin that was half green and half blue. Honestly, it hadn't even occurred to me at the time that the boy I faintly saw for a split second was the same as my brother's ghost boy, until my mother said, "Wait, Anonmi, said he saw a boy on the side of the road too. Where did you say he saw the ghost boy?" My father said he saw him just north of Hawthorne. My mother, interested at the time, recalled that it was north of Hawthorne that I asked about the boy on the side of the road. We talked for hours about the possibility of there being a ghost boy on the side of the road. I can't say for certain that what I saw was a ghost, and it almost felt like a dream to me when I saw it. But the vivid images of what my brother saw lend credence to the fact that it was indeed a ghost boy, especially since drivers watching the road didn't see him when he was in plain view on the side of the road.
The woman in white. Experience. I can't believe I fell asleep at my girlfriend's house. When I woke up it was 1 a.m. on the subway and I had an 8 a.m. class, 2.5 hours away. I hate driving so far so late. I also hate not getting enough sleep at night. I got dressed and headed out. I had to admit that getting out of the city had never been so nice, without the normal traffic, and it was cold enough to roll down the window without feeling like you were sitting in an oven. My music was blasting. There was nothing but the road, me, and the occasional car or truck. Surprisingly, I wasn't even that tired. It was pitch black, all you could see was what my headlights illuminated and the night sky. It was beautiful. Driving across the plateau was my favorite part of the trip. During the day you could see the vegetation starting to change and some beautiful mountains in the background. The temperature had dropped a bit and I was belting out my favorite playlist. At the same time, I was constantly scanning the side of the road for coyotes or other wild animals that might wander onto it. If you've ever had close encounters with animals, you know how important this is so you don't run them over. Halfway through the song, I saw something moving from the right side of the road. It all happened extremely fast, but I remember every detail. My peripheral vision caught something white. I remember it was so white it looked like it had a bit of a glow to it. When my eyes focused, I saw that it was moving towards the road. I still couldn't see what it was, but it sure as hell had my attention at that point. I started to slow down just in case. I also turned down the music. As it came within range of my headlights, I could make out the figure of a woman, in a white robe or dress, moving at a fairly fast pace. I realized that if we both kept up the speed, we would crash further ahead. Between her long, flowing white dress and the bushes on the side of the road, I couldn't see her legs, but I knew she was running fast, like she was escaping from something. For a split second I doubted my sanity. A woman in a white dress, in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night. Maybe she was more tired than I thought. She was still running towards the road, but she seemed to have slowed down a bit. I could see her long blonde hair now, and I was trying to see her face, to see her expression, to figure out if she had noticed my car speeding down the highway, to see if she was running towards me to call me, if she was scared, Or if maybe she was laughing and it was all a late-night prank? Anything to help me decide what to do. Was it to help her and get out of the car or not? I slowed down considerably, but I still wasn't sure if I should stop the car completely. I had heard stories of women in distress stopping cars of people who were then never found alive again. No thanks. She was almost at the edge of the road, right in front of me. I still couldn't make out her face, but I could tell she wasn't even looking in my direction. She hadn't noticed me or the car. I braked hard and swerved slightly into the other lane, saw that no cars were coming and focused on her. As soon as she hit the sidewalk, she disappeared. She disintegrated. She turned into smoke right at the edge of the road. Then I put my car barely rolling at walking speed. I searched the side of the road. There was no sign of a woman. I searched the road behind me, in front of me, beside me. Nothing. No woman, no other car, nothing. For a second I thought about going out to look for her, but decided against it. Out of caution, I was afraid it was a trap. I made a note of the mile marker and drove off. Was that real? Was I so tired that I was shaping shadows? Why would the shadows be white and bright? If she was real, where did she go? I pulled out my cell phone and called the police. I decided to phrase the incident another way because I wanted them to be there and check, but I couldn't tell them that the woman turned into smoke. I told the operator that I was driving and that I thought I saw a woman wandering down the road near the mile marker I made note of, that it seemed strange that someone was there in the middle of nowhere in the middle of the night, but that I was alone and didn't feel safe stopping. The response I got was that the highway patrol wasn't far from there and that they would check it out. I remember checking the news for weeks, but nothing unusual was ever reported about that area other than a few accidents or roadwork alerts. For years I tried to convince myself that I had imagined it all, until I came across about the lady in white. I don't know if that's what I saw, but I know I saw something that night. Has anyone here ever experienced anything like that?
The shadowman follows me. When my husband and I were dating, we had an experience that still makes our hair stand on end. At the time, he didn't believe in anything that didn't have a logical explanation, and I considered myself agnostic, although I had already had some experiences that escaped any scientific explanation. This happened when I invited him to my parents' house to meet them. But first I have to go back in time a little to give some context. Before I met my husband, when I was still single, I lived for a few months in the house of an Arab family. That was a peculiar time, because things happened in that house that I couldn't explain. The clearest one was one night when I heard children's laughter, even though there were no children at home. It only happened once, but it was so clear and disconcerting that it left me with an unsettling feeling. In addition, other strange events occurred, such as objects changing places or unexplained noises. When I talked about this with my family, they told me that every time they came to visit me in that house, they felt that the energy was heavy. In the end, after those months, I returned to my parents' house, but those experiences always remained present in my mind. Now, back to the event with my husband. Years later, I met him and invited him to my parents' house to meet. That night, my parents had to go out, so we were left alone in the hallway of the house. My uncle, who lived with us, was working in the workshop on the other side of the house, completely away from where we were. It was around 9 p.m. when my husband began to explain to me how to prepare mate, a typical drink from Uruguay and other South American countries. As he was talking, suddenly, we heard a clear voice between us saying, "Oh yes, mate." We froze. My husband stared at me, as if he was trying to check if it was me. He looked at my mouth, searching for some sign of what I had said, but we both knew it wasn't me. We looked everywhere, trying to find some explanation, but there was nothing and no one around. And just then, we heard something even more shocking again. "Salam alaikum," an Arabic greeting. I froze, as at that moment neither of us had mentioned Salam alaikum. Then, almost instinctively, he replied, "Malaikum salam." By doing so, I confirmed that we had both heard the same thing, because my husband, still confused, repeated, "Salam alaikum? Malaikum salam? How did you know what to say?" I was in shock too. I told him I don't know. It's a greeting, and I think it's like a blessing. If it's an entity, I don't think it's bad. Even though I tried to reassure him, Inside, I was just as scared. We were very nervous for the rest of the night, and I couldn't help but wonder if I had somehow brought something with me from that Arab house.
The Ghost Girl from New Mexico. This is not my story, but my mother's. In 1999, my mother was 17 years old and was on a road trip with her aunt and cousin. They were going from Colorado to El Paso, Texas, and during the trip they took Highway 54 through New Mexico. A few hours passed and then they stopped in Vaughn, New Mexico, at an Allsup's to buy some things and go to the bathroom. Once they got back in the car, they continued their way down the road. Then everyone was hungry. There was nothing where they were, so they passed a rundown restaurant. After that, they continued their way. It was getting early in the morning. It was about 2 a.m. Then suddenly, she saw a light on the side of the road as if it were a powerful flashlight. Then my mother's aunt suddenly stopped the car, making the characteristic brake noise. Then within seconds, a girl appeared on the side of the road. She was wearing something pink, and it looked like she was holding a doll in her hand as she crossed the road. Through the car lights, you couldn't see her face, but you could see her hair, which was long and brown. She crossed the street from the driver's side to the passenger's side, where my mother was. Once she got to the corner of the car, she walked over to the passenger's side window and stood there looking at everyone. At that moment, my mother closed her eyes and had a bad feeling. Her hair stood up and her skin went cold. At that moment, my mother's aunt couldn't even react and stood frozen looking at her until my mother yelled at her to speed up the car as fast as possible. Her aunt reacted and stepped on the accelerator while asking the two of them not to look back. The cousin refused and looked back. The little girl was no longer anywhere, as if she had vanished. After a minute, my mother opened her eyes, checked her watch, and saw that it was 3:03 a.m. My mother has since searched the internet for answers, but no one has a story similar to her experience. Also, the light on the side of the road is very strange.
The Phantom Cyclist. This is my story of contact with the afterlife. I am a 45-year-old woman from Victoria, Australia. I was driving through Cranbourne towards Devon Meadows probably between 4 and 5 a.m. sometime in the winter of 2005. The morning was very overcast. I was on the South Gippsland Highway and could barely see. Then I saw a cyclist some distance ahead of me. I slammed on the brakes, but it seemed like my car was not going to stop in time. As I got closer, it began to look like the cyclist was reversing. Then it became clear that he was transparent. He ended up sitting on my bonnet when my car stopped. He looked like he was made of some sort of golden light. He reached his hand out to me through my unbroken windscreen. He seemed to want me to take it, and I did. It felt spongy and strange, like nothing I had ever touched before. After a moment, he disappeared. This seemed to invite other ghosts in. I was haunted for the rest of the morning. I saw a disembodied torso appear in a window, terrifying me, and also a ghost man with a ghost dog on a sidewalk. The ghost man was older and wearing a white undershirt. I think the ghost dog was mostly white with some dark spots. At least one other person I know has seen them. I searched traffic records and contacted Cranbourne locals via Facebook, trying to find out as much as I could. I eventually traced the encounter with the cyclist to an accident that occurred around 5 a.m. on July 2, 1990. The person was 25 years old, turning 26 in August. His name was Jason. Jason was riding his bike to work very early in the morning. He had lost his driver's license. He was hit from behind by the car. It was a red Ford, although some locals seemed to think it was a truck. The vehicle struck him and he did not survive the impact. He was a lost soul and had a sad past. He had some good friends, but he spent a lot of time alone despite that. When I met him, I felt like he wanted my comfort and maybe my help. There was a sense of loneliness and sadness in his story. One of Jason's friends kindly gave me some information about Jason's life and death, as well as telling me what he was like. Other Cranbourne locals also helped me piece this together. One of Jason's friends kindly gave me some information about Jason's life and passing away, as well as telling me what he was like. Other Cranbourne locals also helped me piece this together. It is the only bicyclist accident that occurred in all of Casey at that time of day according to records. But the records weren't accurate regarding Jason's age. I know this because I've seen a photo of his grave. His friend also told me that traffic records only use initial estimates from accident scenes, so some dates are wrong. I've been told that other people have seen my phantom rider, like a rider in the fog who then disappears. I think he probably contacted me because we had certain things in common, plus I was there on a foggy winter morning much like the day he left. Plus, I was 26 when I had the experience, almost the same age he was when he passed away. We were about 15 years apart, and it may even have been the 15th anniversary of his accident when I met him.